we had just finished talking about Kamala Harris's prosecutorial record. Now I want to move on to healthcare, and I was delighted at these exchanges because there were so many moments in Kamala Harris's campaign already where she was wishy-washy on what she supports. Does she support Medicare for all? She says one thing on stage, and then as soon as the debate or the town hall is over, you either have her aides or Kamala Harris herself talking to reporters and backing away from Medicare for all. So I was happy to see that she was asked about it, she was called out on it. And I want to start off actually with Joe Biden going after Kamala Harris on healthcare. Let's take a look.
The senators had several plans so far. And anytime someone tells you you're going to get something good in 10 years, you should wonder why it takes 10 years. If you notice, there's no talk about the fact that the plan in 10 years will cost $3 trillion. You will lose your employer-based insurance. And in fact, this is the single most important issue facing the public. And to be very blunt and to be very straightforward, you can't beat President Trump with double talk on this plan.
So he is attacking her from the right, understand that, right? So he is against Medicare for all, but I do like that he called her out on how she proposes two different things. On one hand, she says she's in favor of Medicare for all. She even refers to her plan as Medicare for all with private insurance, which means it's not Medicare for all. Anyway, so he calls her out on that one issue that I think is important to call her out on, but I do understand he's attacking her from the right. With that said, I want to get your thoughts on it, David. What did you think about that? Did you think that was a strong moment for Biden?
I mean, I think I'd rather just mention how ridiculous Kamala Harris's Medicare for all plan is.
Okay, so let's elaborate on that a little bit.
This is just the ultimate in poll testing, and the fact that Kamala Harris, I go back a lot to the personnel behind the policy, like who is writing this stuff. We had a great thing actually by our writing fellow Marcia Brown today at the American Prospect about who are the actual people writing these policies, who are the top policy advisors. And for Kamala Harris, it's her sister, and her sister was the top policy director for Hillary Clinton in 2016, Maya Harris. And there are a lot of Clintonites who were around the policy shop on that campaign in Kamala Harris's campaign. And the poll testing of this Medicare for all, or whatever you want to call it, bill is just so obvious and such a carryover. It eliminates anything that anyone has ever said was bad about Medicare for all in any way. Takes away the taxes for people under $100,000 when there's very little chance that you can do a broad-based bill with healthcare for everybody if you don't have some sort of transfer in that process. It takes away, you don't like getting rid of private insurance? We'll give you private insurance.
Right.
You don't like having to tax people? I don't want to talk about that. Well, we won't tax anybody.
So
you don't like this? I won't. I'll throw that back in. The fact that it's a 10-year transition is because there's a 10-year budget window when you go to pass a policy, and so it looks cheap because all of the spending happens outside of the 10 years, or the bulk of it anyway. So it's just not playing straight with what the costs are. Everything is just relentlessly poll tested. It's a fantasy policy that tries to give 2 scoops of ice cream and take away all the bad stuff, and it's ridiculous.
So I want to talk about this even more because this is the type of conversation that's always lacking when the issue of private insurance comes up. So first of all, we did a deep dive into the framing of private insurance. The way that polls are framed makes it seem like people are going to lose their doctors when in reality, they don't care about their private insurer. They're not worried about losing Cigna. They're not worried about losing Blue Cross Blue Shield. They're worried about losing their primary care physician or the hospital that they go to. They want to make sure they go to the same place and see the same people, and I understand that that's important. Under Medicare for all, that wouldn't change. So the framing we've talked about, but now I want to talk about why it's an issue to keep private insurance in the context of the American system, right? So people have come to me and said, well, look, in this country, they've kept private insurance and it's worked out okay, but we have an issue with corruption in America, right? So I feel like a system that has government-run healthcare and still maintains private insurance honestly makes that government-run healthcare very vulnerable. I see it very similar to how public education has been gutted in America, right? Because you have this two-tiered system. You have the wealthy paying for private school. You have the wealthy who don't want to pay taxes, right? And so they want to lower their property taxes, which is one of the ways that you pay for public education in America. And so they'll fight tooth and nail to lower their taxes. That guts public education. Then you have that two-tiered system. People who can't afford the public education send their kids to the public schools, which have now been defunded. And the same vulnerable system would be put in place with healthcare in America. That's what I'm concerned about. That's the issue I have with private insurers. Now, if Medicare remained the way that it is today and it only covered what it covers today, then we have a huge problem because it doesn't cover enough. But under Bernie Sanders' bill, for anyone who has any interest in actually reading it, it covers everything, which is why you don't have a need for the private insurers, right? So anyway.
The problem comes in the courage in pushing something that's new and different. The reason why the establishment is such an easy thing to go towards is because whether you're in the establishment or out, you're used to the established process and the standard for what we're doing things. So people say, I don't lose my health care, because enough people that are in establishment, from the media to politicians to everyone that talks about it, is you don't want to lose that though, do you? And so it scares enough people and it's hard to push.
You're describing status quo bias, and we see this particularly in healthcare. Every time a major healthcare plan, even one that isn't Medicare for all, even Obamacare, right?
Right.
Every time a healthcare plan gets pushed forward, status quo bias kicks in, and that's what the opponents of the plan use. And those opponents are usually insurers and the elephant in the room, hospitals, because who actually charges you this stuff? Your insurer isn't charging you 10 times more for a hip replacement than any other place on the face of the earth.
Yes.
It's your hospital. And it's almost like there's a swear jar on stage. And if you say the word hospitals, they're gonna fine you $10,000.
You're absolutely right.
They never talk about hospitals.
You're absolutely right, because people get very sensitive about that. They feel like you're blaming doctors but hospitals overcharge. We did a story about that yesterday. Part of the reason why they do it is because that's how they begin the negotiating process. They know they're about to negotiate with the private insurers. So do you negotiate with the actual cost of the procedure, or do you start with a price that's 10 times higher? So through that negotiation process, you can still turn a pretty giant profit.
We just saw right here in California a bill to ban surprise billing, and that's when you don't know that your doctor was out of network, and all of a sudden you have this bill for thousands of dollars. And the hospital industry killed it in a blue state with 2/3 majorities in each house of the legislature. If we don't start talking about the hospital industry, who is funding the bills right now, 2 years before the election, against single payer, against healthcare reform, if we don't start talking about this and the fact that the only way that you're going to get a sane healthcare policy in this country is by lowering the reimbursement rates on extremely well-to-do hospital administrators and extremely well-to-do doctors who earn more in this country than anywhere else in the planet. If we don't deal with that, we're not going to get any kind of reform that we seek.
So I want to go to the next video on this topic. It's video 3. And then John, I know you're still with us. I want to get your thoughts when we come back.
Your response, Senator Harris? Absolutely. Unfortunately, Vice President Biden, you're just simply inaccurate in what you're describing. The reality is that our plan will bring health care to all Americans under a Medicare for All system. Our plan will allow people to start signing up on the first day. Babies will be born into our plan, and right now 4 million babies almost are born every day in America, or every year in America. Under our plan, we will ensure that everyone has access to health care. Your plan, by contrast, leaves out almost 10 million Americans. So I think that you should really think about what you're saying, but be reflective and understand that the people of America want access to health care and do not want cost to be their barrier to getting it.
It is fascinating to see two people who don't have a real plan debating one another as if either one of them has the moral high ground. But I am curious to hear what you think, John. What did you think of that whole exchange?
So what we just saw is an example of where something that you can want hypothetically doesn't necessarily pan out in practice. if you had told me that they're going to spend 30 minutes going back and forth with the two highest polling people on the stage, going in depth into their healthcare plan, that sounds good, right? That's what we want. We want depth and we want to know what they stand for. In the end, it felt bogged down. It felt too specific for people at home to actually follow. It seemed difficult to know who was actually telling the truth, both about their record and about what's actually in their plan and how they would implement it. And what seemed to be lost in the constant back and forth, like really constant back and forth, was it started to feel like, why are they all proposing crazy things? They're all saying that each other is crazy. Would this actually be an improvement? And what was lost was that the current situation is not sustainable. Kamala Harris made the point once that the current situation isn't tenable from a financial standpoint, but it felt almost like, well, you know what? They all just seem kind of bad. Is it even worth going in this direction when half the people on the stage are saying it's going to bankrupt the country anyway? I feel like what we saw, especially considering that there weren't really a lot of super strong Medicare for All advocates making the case on the stage tonight, it felt like it actually did more harm to the fight than good.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I like that she got called out on being wishy-washy. That was the only positive thing that came out of that exchange. But she is also right in calling Biden out in coming up way short in his plan.
It was like the inadequate against the inscrutable.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it was just two people. You know, it's kind of like when two last place teams play each other in basketball, and like, yeah, I'm sort of watching, but I'm also checking my email, and I don't really care.
So I guess the question will come of how is it going to get played out next in the media, next time they make appearances, next time anyone else talks about it. Because once Bernie's plan came out, when Elizabeth Warren had her plan come out, people talked about it extensively, negatively, but extensively. Is that discussion going to be had later? Because again, these are moments on a debate stage when they have a minute or two, at best a 5-minute span where they're going back and forth. Will this get talked about in depth about how really neither one of the plans is going anywhere to do much for anyone? And put up against some of the actual Medicare for All plans that have been proposed.
Well, I mean, we're not going to see anything. We're not going to see this primary take shape until all the major candidates are actually on stage together.
That's true. Yeah.
With enough time and ability to go back and forth to really challenge each other. I mean, we need Warren, Biden, Harris, Sanders, and really nobody else, because those are one of those four is going to be your nominee. We need them on stage together.
What do you think about Buttigieg? Go ahead, John.
Yeah, just for a second, one of the things that's most frustrating is that I agree. That's what I was thinking the whole time. I want to see like the core 4 to 6 or whatever on the stage. And the thing is, there's no guarantee that even in the next one are we actually going to get that. It's likely that some people will drop out, but we're still probably going to end up having to have 2 debate stages. I haven't seen any indication that they're going to switch over to a top of the card, undercard sort of format. And so Biden might still avoid having to stand next to Bernie and Warren, even in like 6 weeks. We'll have gotten that far into the primary without actually having seen that.
We'll see. I mean, there's a pretty big threshold both for numbers in terms of donors. 130,000 donors is pretty significant. Right now, I think 7 people have qualified. You also have the 2% threshold. So a lot of these people that were on stage tonight, this is the last time you will see them speaking to a crowd of more than 10. I mean,
if you had to guess, who do you think is not going to meet the threshold from either of these 2 nights?
Who's not going to meet the threshold? Delaney, Hickenlooper, Gabbard. I don't think Williamson's going to hit 130. The poll numbers doesn't seem like is going to bring in Inslee. There are a lot of people you're not going to see on the stage. I don't think you're going to get over 10.
Okay, I guess we'll see. I don't know. There's still a lot of time.
Thanks for watching this free clip of the Young Turks. Don't forget to become a TYT member today. For more exclusive content, join now at tyt.com/join.